Hi, I'm natekokernot. Welcome to my channel. I've been talking here lately about perception, and I've been leaning heavily on the research that a cognitive scientist named Donald Hoffman has been engaged in along with his colleagues in recent times. My last video covered his interface theory of perception, which comes to the conclusion that we can learn a lot about how our perception of the world is operating from understanding how we perceive and interact with our phones, our computers, and even video games. I suggested another possibility in my last video that life, as we perceive it, isn't to be taken any more literally than we take a video game like Grand Theft Auto. I'm not a video game player myself, and I've heard parents expressing their frustration that their teenage children are spending too much time playing them and not enough time focusing on getting ahead in life. But I've begun to wonder if many of them haven't checked out of life because it makes no sense to them anymore. If that's what they're thinking, I get it. That which we think of as real life has gotten far more absurd than video games. I was about 42 years into this game of life when I was introduced to A Course in Miracles, which is a book that was suggesting, among other things, that the world we see with our eyes has no reality to it beyond being a symbolic representation of the contents of our unconscious minds. I decided to quit what I was doing, building things like houses and shelves, and I went back to school to study psychology. I was always a liberal, politically speaking. It was shortly after this that the first election that included Donald Trump came into view. I remember the Access Hollywood tape. I don't have to remind most of you what was said in that video, and I remember thinking to myself, well, that campaign is over. And then it wasn't. I could not make sense of what I was seeing, but by this time, it was beginning to dawn on me that this life might be an illusion or a dream, and that was the only sense I could make of what I was seeing on the screen. It was probably why I still felt stable emotionally. And here's the thing that I do know as a therapist. Keeping your emotions stable is how you avoid contributing to the chaos. The basic concept that Donald Hoffman is putting forth about the images that meet our eyes is that they are not happening independently of our minds. In other words, that we are constructing them, and all the while ignorant of the fact that we are doing so. That's also what A Course in Miracles says. The interface theory suggests that we're rendering these images on the fly, and that's why his screen-based metaphor is so useful. Supposedly, you can play games like Grand Theft Auto using virtual reality headsets nowadays. Somebody who knows better than I could leave a comment below to confirm this for me. We understand in this game that if we stop and think about it, that red Lamborghini that shows up in the lane next to us isn't really there. We might understand that it was rendered in the instant that we turned our heads to the left or to the right, expecting to see it there. We might even be able to understand that the guy we're playing against, who is looking through his own virtual reality headset, is seeing a different red Lamborghini than we are. His is contained within his headset, just as mine is. They're not the same thing. In fact, neither of them are actually real. If someone snuck up behind us and yanked both of our headsets off, all of a sudden there would be no red Lamborghinis in the room with us. That's a pretty safe prediction to make. I agree with Hoffman that our perceptions of the world around us might very much behave in a similar fashion to this. It's the only way that I could explain why some people didn't find it as alarming as I did that Donald Trump had said he was entitled to grab women by the crotch because of his stature as a public figure and still be a viable candidate for president. We're simply not seeing the same realities anymore. We're rendering our realities on the fly based on what we want to see, Fox or MSNBC. That made sense to me. So if we take this logic and extend it to the age-old riddle, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there, does it make a sound? The answer might turn out to be that there is no tree falling in the forest because there's no one there to render it. I also understand that we feel more emotionally safe and secure in believing that the world around us is happening even when we're not there. But with the news of the world these days, where unspeakable atrocities are happening, in Gaza for instance, or at Alligator Alcatraz down in the Everglades. It might just be that there is no way of feeling peaceful while believing this sort of thing is really happening. So you might say, good for you, Nate. You've managed to find a way to delude yourself into thinking that the world isn't real so that you can be at peace with yourself. You just stick your head up your ass. I get it. It's pretty far out, but here's my response. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But also, what if it's true? Since Donald Hoffman, a scientist, is saying exactly that and explaining it in a very reasonable sounding way. I'm sharing links to videos of his with every one of these posts so that you can listen for yourself and decide if it sounds reasonable or not. Don't just take my word for it. He is far from the only scientist who's suggesting this. And it does track with what the mystics have been saying for millennia now. Shouldn't we at least investigate? See, I highly doubt that if I traveled to the Middle East or to Florida, that I could put a stop to either of those injustices. I probably couldn't convince the guards at the gates of either of those places that what they're doing is wrong. So maybe, just maybe, the best way to change the world is to change my mind about the world and accept the truth in what many, many people are saying nowadays and explaining to us. And then I think, if enough of us began to believe this, could there be a tipping point coming? And many spiritual people that I talk to think so. We have to give a new concept our attention in order to even begin to learn it. And with the world appearing to be hitting rock bottom, now might be a good time. Maybe it's just an assumption that we share that reality is happening independently of our minds. We have been wrong in our assumptions a few times before. We ridicule the people who still hold on to the flat earth perspective after most of us learned otherwise. And we also generally agree that the earth is not the center of our universe, but apparently it took a few centuries after Galileo before people were entirely convinced. Maybe this is the next assumption to fall, and maybe, just maybe, things getting this absurd, like hearing about a guy who doesn't know that the United States has hurricanes being assigned to the post of the head of FEMA, or a guy who doesn't know about Social Security being tapped to be in charge of Social Security. If I racked my brain for an hour, I could come up with probably 100 more absurd headlines just from this year alone. Most spiritual traditions include some version of mentalism, which is the mind over matter idea. Physicalism, also known as materialism, is the opposing view. But even among the believers in physical reality, there seems to be tons of disagreement about what is happening in this physical world. In the next video, I'll dive into the double slit experiment, which is a scientific experiment from quantum physics that has been done countless times over the last 150 years. I'll be switching my focus from cognitive science and evolutionary science to quantum physics, as Donald Hoffman did as well. There's a lot more evidence to be found there that's pointing to the idea that this world is a dream or an illusion. Thank you for listening, and if you find what I'm saying helpful, please like and subscribe. And please watch those Donald Hoffman videos I'm sharing with you. Watch them a few times, because it takes hearing these novel ideas a few times to start believing that your assumptions might be incorrect. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.